Let's bring in Stuart Robert, though, the Employment Minister. He's one of the closest friends of Scott Morrison in the Parliament. Stuart Robert, thanks for your time on a big day in Australian politics. Let me start by saying, what's the mood like within the government, with the PM about to head to Government House within the next couple of hours?
Ready for a great contest. We're ready to show the Australian people what we've done, what we've delivered, and how we're ready to serve them again. It's been a tough 3 years, but we're ready to demonstrate that there is a choice now. It's a very strong choice between a competent government that's delivered some outstanding economic results compared to the rest of the world versus a very untried leader in terms of Mr Albanese. So we're ready to go.
The Prime Minister says he believes in miracles, Stuart Robert. Is that what's needed again in your view?
I think the choice we're going to see in this election, Kieran, it's going to be a good one. The Australian people will get to see the mettle of both leaders. They'll get to see the mettle of both teams. They'll get to see the discipline of our economic team, tax rises or tax increases under Labor versus none under us, a tax limit at 23.9% under the Coalition and unlimited under Labor. It's going to be a good choice. And as we spend the next few weeks fighting this out, that choice will become very stark. We're ready for the choice. Australians know what they get. They know Mr Morrison, they know our team, they know our capacity. It's a very unproven leadership team with Labor, but let's go.
So you're being pretty negative about Anthony Albanese. Is this a sense of things to come, an all-out attack on the Labor leader?
I've been in Parliament now for 15 years, so I've seen Mr Albanese up close, well and truly. I've been in the Expenditure Review Committee now for many, many years. I've sat on the National Security Committee with the Prime Minister and so many others during COVID. I've not seen Mr Albanese on any of those. I've seen him in the House. I've seen his comments about wanting to fight Tories. Mr Albanese is probably the strongest left-wing leader the Labor Party's ever seen. So we've seen him up close. And I think the Australian people are about to see Mr Albanese as we've seen him. He is not a strong leader. He will not stand up to the bullies in his own party. He can't stand up to mean girls and can't stand up to the union thugs in his party. How will he possibly stand up to the Australian people? That is the Mr Albanese we know. That's the Mr Albanese the Australian people are about to see.
Is it a risk, though, for you to be negative? Don't people want a vision, a positive view and outlook for the country?
Well, the Australian people will be presented a choice, Kieran, and they'll get a positive outlook from the Morrison team. They'll get an economic outlook of unemployment at 4% going down, of economic growth at 4%, one of only 9 countries in the world with a AAA rating, credit rating from all 3 agencies. They'll get a positive economic direction from where we're going, and we'll present the risks of the other side, and it will be that stark.
Labor says it's the underdog, having only won 3 times from opposition since World War II. Do you agree with that assessment? Is the government favourite to hold on here?
I agree with the assessment that the Australian people have judged Labor rightly since World War II and only brought them in a number of times. They've only brought Labor in a number of times for a very good reason, Kieran. It's because you can't trust them. The idea that Mr Albanese 3 years ago supported $387 billion worth of taxes, but apparently doesn't support any increases of taxation now, that Mr Albanese has had a taxation road to Damascus moment is simply and utterly unbelievable. That hasn't happened. All he's done is swallowed himself into a zero strategy, into a very low vacant space to try and sneak into the lodge, and that's not going to happen. We'll point out this choice. We'll point out what we believe in, what we stand for, and we'll point out the facts of what Mr Albanese stands for.
Do you accept that your friend, the Prime Minister, is a drag on the Liberal vote, on the coalition vote this time as opposed to 2019?
Absolutely not. If you think about what Mr Morrison has led our nation through on the last 3 years, they are unprecedented since the Second World War. And the fact that he has led our country to a point where our economy is growing faster than most industrialised nations, our unemployment is lower than most industrialised nations, more women are in employment than over 50 years and the highest number of women's participation rate in history. That's what Scott Morrison has led our country through at the same time as facing drought, fire, floods, pestilence, and of course now war in Europe. I don't think any other leader in modern politics has faced what he's faced, and yet to come out now with such strength, with one of the most highest vaccinated nations on earth, one of the lowest mortality rates, I think is extraordinary. And I'm looking forward to standing next to him as often as I can campaigning to tell the story of an extraordinarily resilient economy, the story of a strong nation, the story of a nation prepared for a lot of uncertainty in our region, and that's the choice, and that's the election.
So why has he lost so much paint then in the opinion polls? Why is he not as popular as he was, given what you've argued there through a once-in-a-century pandemic, through the dramas that we've faced in this country over the last few forgettable years in many respects? Do you think that people are sort of saying they just want to move on from this period and they associate him with it?
It's been a tough 3 years, Kieran. It has been hard. For those of us who couldn't see loved ones passing away in aged care facilities and other areas because of COVID lockdowns, through to the floods and the droughts and the fires and the pestilence, to those who couldn't get loved ones home from overseas, to areas where there were restrictions all over the place from COVID. It's just been really difficult. I understand the frustrations of Australians during those difficult periods. But what we'll be saying to the Australian people during the election campaign is, here is the dividends, here's the results, here is our team, here is what we're capable of. Yes, we've made mistakes. Goodness, I have as well. And we'll be the first to admit them, and we'll be the first to make sure we don't make them again, and we'll be the first to ensure we put the Australian people first in what we do. That's what we're rolling forward in the campaign, and that's the choice we're going to present to the Australian people. A well-known, well-understood, economically disciplined and literate team versus a very, very unknown high-taxing team in Mr Albanese.
And finally, the Labor Party believes your former strength is now a weakness in terms of economic management due to government waste and what they say has been widespread rorting. Is this a vulnerability? The first ad Labor puts out there is targeting economic management. They say they'll rein in the spending and the waste.
I was there in 2007, Kieran, when Kevin 07, remember that? That someone apparently said that the Labor Party was being led by fiscal conservatives. Well, how did that work out for us? How did it pink bats and cash for clunkers? How did all that run? How did overpriced school halls? Labor is always big on a talk. They're always big to say they're conservatives and they'll rein in spending. Except 3 years ago, they had $387 billion worth of new taxes. Taxes on everyday ordinary Australians. They haven't changed. The veritable leopard has not changed its spots. Let's not kid ourselves. We've presented a budget, our entire economic plan we've laid out for the Australian people. By day two, Labor had moved on and weren't asking questions in the House about it, because our plan showed $100 billion with the budget better off over the forward estimates, and the vast bulk of that are put off for debt reduction and savings. We've demonstrated our economic credentials. The economy reflects the discipline we've put in place. Let's bring on the election, let's bring on this choice, and let's present this choice to the Australian people.
Well, it's going to happen soon enough, within the next hour or two. Stuart Robert, thanks for your time on a big day in Australian politics. Appreciate it.
Great to talk to you, Kieran. Cheers.